Hey everybody, this is Beth Durinsky from Odyssey Insurance and Investments, and you're listening to the podcast, Real Insurance Made Simple. As a working mom of young kids and a small business owner, I know firsthand life happens. So come along with me and learn how your insurance policies work when real life happens and you need them most. Okay, everybody, we have JC here with Catalyst Insurance Group, and today we are going to be talking about what it means to be an advisor versus just purchasing an insurance transaction. So, JC, I'm going to let you run with it, your background, who you are, all the things.
Awesome. Well, Beth, thank you so much for having me on here. I always appreciate the opportunity to share what I know. I don't know what that's worth, but I can at least share what I know, and if hopefully somebody can find value in what we're bringing here, and they'll be able to take something from this some way, somehow. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Well, I think what you have to say is valuable, so hopefully the listeners do too.
If nothing else, you will learn something from this.
Yes.
So a little bit about my background is when I was at Ball State University, I was a sophomore in a business class, and a gentleman came in to talk to our class. And there's a little bit of a background before the college part. When I was 10 years old, my father passed away. By the time I was 15, my mom and I were homeless. Not like living in a car or under a bridge homeless, but I was a couch surfer. Basically, we lived with various people in our community until I could graduate high school and go on to college. And so with that being said, when I was 19, a gentleman came to one of our business classes, and he made the comment, "Have you ever seen an old, poor insurance guy?" And with that, I was hooked. I said, "No, I haven't," but I was hooked for all the wrong reasons. And but I decided to go into the insurance business at that point in time because I knew I was going to sell something, and I liked relationships. I liked learning about people's families and their businesses, and I was hooked. So right out of college, I went to work for a carrier that specifically did commercial. They didn't do any personal lines. They only did commercial insurance, and they only did it in certain niches. And so because of that, I became very good at knowing the ins and outs of those particular types of businesses. Had a lot of success. And then 2008 happened. And when 2008 happened, I lost over 70% of my income in a 12-month period. And all of a sudden, I didn't really like the person that I had become in that situation. And so, God held a mirror up in front of my face, and I didn't really like what I saw. And so I had become somebody who was obsessed with status and money and stuff and prestige and all of the wrong things. And so I didn't like what I saw. And so I stuck it out for another year or two in the insurance business. And then 2011, I left the insurance business altogether. I let my licenses lapse. I got out of it. It was very painful for me because I felt like I'd wasted the last decade. And I didn't like who I'd become in that process, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so did a lot of other things in between there, marketed a travel company for 5 years, had a lot of fun, didn't make enough money. And then my family and I decided to move from Lafayette down here to the south side of Indianapolis, where her family was from, and went to work at Sunbelt Rentals for a couple of years, did equipment rental. I knew contractors in and out, and we'll get more into that in a second, but I knew contractors inside and out because that was one of my largest pieces of business that I worked with. And so selling construction rental equipment to them was easy. So I did that for a little over 2 years, and it was just a rough environment. It was like going to work at a high school locker room every day. And so from that, I left there, went and sold office furniture for a hot second. Really didn't like the person I was working for. And I realized that I am not a fashion designer in any form or fashion. So at the end of the day, I got tired of working for greedy, unethical people, and I decided that I wanted to do business on my terms with my morals and my values. And so the guy I was working for at the time said, "Hey, you're spending too much time with your family. You need to be at the office more." And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so, bub." So I decided that I needed to do my own thing. And my wife's like, "Well, why don't you go into the insurance business again?" And I said, "No, not happening. We're not doing it."
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you ever want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So I was sitting in church one day, and a pastor was giving a sermon about how we're all given certain talents and abilities and gifts that we could ultimately use to glorify him. And then that really struck a chord with me. And it was in that moment I knew what I was going to do. I was going to open an insurance agency with the purpose of making an impact in and around our community. See, a catalyst is a condition, event, or person that is cause of an important change. And so I kind of adopted this idea that we are here providing something you have to have and repurposing a small portion of what we have been entrusted with to elevate the human condition, meaning help feed, clothe, or educate, and support our military veterans and first responders. And so that's kind of the passion project. Insurance is the vehicle that enables me to do that. And I feel with the knowledge and expertise and values that we bring to the table that we can do it better than most. And so that just provides the engine for our community involvement. And so that's what I'm really, really passionate about. That's how we've gotten here. August 1st, it'll be 6 years from scratch. So yeah,
Wow. Congratulations.
I don't know what else you want me to say about that. So
No, a couple of things. I didn't know that about your backstory. I think it's phenomenal, the leaps and bounds you've made over the years. And I love that God played a big part and you put thought into your name. So a quick backstory on how Odyssey came about. My husband and I started on a faith journey shortly before this, and we weren't really reading the Bible, none of it. So we were just Googling biblical names or faith-related names. And the word Odyssey is not actually in the Bible, but it kept coming up and it meant new journey. And so I was like, okay, like we actually started a trailer business for him with that. And then we just transitioned it to my insurance name. And so I resonate with what God put on your heart, and that's God put it on my heart to do this. For family purposes, cultural purposes, creating an office who understands families and moms and the things. So anyways, not too much on that, but I love it. With that being said, how are you using that vehicle to be an advisor to your clients?
well, the barrier to entry in our industry is very, very low. You take a
Yes.
40-hour class and you get a license, and now you are authorized to go protect businesses and people's lives that they have spent decades building with blood, sweat, tears, pain. They've done without so that they could feed their business. And so the barrier to entry is very, very low. But at the end of the day, I think the difference between an insurance advisor and what I like to call a policy peddler
I like
is
that.
education and expertise, right? This isn't a default career that I just fell into, which you hear a lot of times. Oh, I was a high school athlete and the coach asked if I wanted to start selling insurance. No, I actually chose this career. I chose this profession. I invest in my craft. I'm constantly trying to learn the ins and outs on how I can protect your business better, because at the end of the day, I'm a business owner too now, and I have to take steps to make sure my business is protected as well. And it's so much more than price. And unfortunately, the marketing messages that have gotten out there focus so much on the price and not on the quality of what you're getting and the quality of an advisor. I might see something in an article I'm reading, in an industry article, talking about a specific new exclusion that's coming out in policies. And that might spark something for me to reach out to one of my clients and say, hey, I just came across this. I didn't know if you were aware of this, or, but I just saw this business get sued for this. Might be something to take a look at. So from that standpoint, I really feel that's really the biggest difference. Too many people are out there just so obsessed with quoting. I don't quote anybody. I provide second opinions. I do insurance evaluations. I will review your insurance policies, but I don't quote anything.
Oh, I like that. So we obviously use the words quoting, but we are really big on, do you understand what you have previously purchased? Do you know what you are paying for on your current policy versus the options that can be provided to you? So, but I like the terminology used there. That's nice.
Yeah, quote immediately takes the focus to price.
Yes. Yes, it does. Which brings me to a question that I don't have on there. How are you relaying to your clients, which I have a pretty idea where you're going to go with this, but the value of coverages versus premium and overcoming that, but you're more because of this. Obviously, majority of the time, it is because you're providing additional coverages and better coverages. But when that's not always the case, how are you handling that?
A lot of times I just like to ask them if they're the cheapest person in their industry.
Oh,
And why not?
I like that.
That's a good place to start. Now, there's a certain segment of the population that doesn't matter what you say to them,
Mm-hmm.
they don't care. They think insurance is a scam. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They have to have it, and so for them, they only care about the price. And you know what? That's not a prospect for me. It's just not. I'm not going to waste my time, energy, and effort trying to educate you and be an advisor. And if you're not going to value what we bring to the table,
Right, right,
I'm ignorant to think that price isn't a part of it,
right.
but it's not the only component. Okay.
No. Yeah.
And so that's where that conversation starts. If I'll walk away from an opportunity if they're happy with their agent, they have good coverages. I've reviewed their coverages. They have good coverages. And when I ask them, why am I here? Why are we having this meeting? Well, we go get quotes every 3 years just to keep them honest. I said, well, number one, it sounds like you have a trust problem. And number two, if you're happy with them, great. If they screw up or something goes awry, call me. I'd be happy to take a look at this and help you. But I don't need practice entering information into a computer so I can generate a proposal.
I like that.
I just don't, because what's going to happen is they're going to give that to their current agent and ask them to match it. And I just, I only play where we can win, where we have a good opportunity to win. I would say normally going into a situation, probably 90% of the time, I already know if I'm going to win the business before I ever put anything in front of them.
That's good to know. I see it. And I really like that because you can always usually tell by how they start the conversation of what they're looking for. And right now I am doing quotes even if people ask, but I try to let them know, this shouldn't be completely price driven. And again, to piggyback off what you said, we would be ignorant to think that budget and premium doesn't come into play. But what does that mean and what does that look like for them? So it's just a part of the conversation.
It is. And, it's not their fault.
No.
Okay. Our industry, unfortunately, again, water will seek the lowest level. Our industry has educated people to get quotes and to shop and go with the cheapest. And that's the constant messaging they're being bombarded with day in, day out. Anybody that calls on their business is doing the same thing. That's what they've been conditioned. Now, in a conversation with them, an initial conversation, we can find out if they are open to maybe there being a better way to do insurance, a better way, a better type of agent than maybe what they're used to. But that's, I can't fault them for what they have been conditioned to believe.
Just have to show them a different path and see if they're willing to travel that with you pretty much.
Right. Parachutes work best when they're open, not when they're closed. just like our minds.
Yep, exactly. So we kind of already hit on the next point. Obviously, we know that you are bringing a value to your clients besides just what you called an insurance peddler. And kind of already on being an advisor. Do you have anything else before I move on from that that you want to add on to that?
To be honest, we focus on a couple of things that are very, very easy. It's very low hanging fruit. Return phone calls and emails.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. I know.
Oh, the amount of people that call our office that say, I haven't heard back. And I'm like, what? Can you, we even are like, we'll provide an update. Hey, we're working on this. We just want you to know.
The other one is education and transparency, right? You might not like the answer I have to give you, but it is the answer.
Right.
I'm not here to hide anything. I've got nothing to hide. That doesn't benefit you. It doesn't benefit me. It doesn't benefit the long-term relationship here. One of my clients one time told me, he goes, bad news does not get better with time.
No, rip the Band-Aid
So
off.
let's just get it out there and deal with it. So yeah, that's what I've got for you on that.
Well, and I do like that because it is frustrating as an agent to hear the feedback that other agents are creating in our industry. The low bar that you mentioned is creating us to have a bad name for the people who do truly try to work with and help those clients.
But the flip side of that coin, though, is that's what also provides the opportunity.
True. The service and all of that, when people give us the opportunity to show them that, we haven't had any bad feedback on that part.
Right. It's not hard to stand out.
No, you're right. 100%. So, okay. Love that. How often do you sit and review with your clients? Do you do it on an annual basis? Do you let them come to you? What do you recommend for your clients? What does that look like?
It depends on the complexity of the account. To some degree, I'm always willing to review anything. Call me and ask me, send me an email, text me, whatever. I'm always willing to view anything. But the more complex an account gets, we have a threshold in our office that we try to do a review at least annually, and we try to do it 4 months ahead of time just to make sure that everything's square heading into renewal time, right? Try to fend off any unexpecteds last minute, talk about what we're seeing in the industry, review any claims that may be open, talk about maybe different risk management practices that we can implement that I can convey to underwriting, review certificate list. Their lives are busy too. And it's very easy for them to buy a vehicle 4:30 on a Friday, and by Monday they're on moving and they forgot to call us and tell us.
Yeah.
So trying to catch those kind of unexpecteds. Type of things.
Do you do those? I'm sure it depends on the client. And again, in person, over the phone, how do you touch base with them or start that 4-month process?
I'm an in-person guy. I prefer to do everything in person when it makes sense. Even a lot of times when it doesn't make sense, I still prefer to do it in person.
Okay.
So that's my preferred method. Now, I'm not going to drive 2 hours to sit down and do a review with an account that is $3,000 in premium. Happy to schedule a Zoom call and do it.
Right.
That kind of thing. But, you got to be, as much as I would love to be able to do everyone in person, it's just not feasible.
Yeah. Do you typically go to them or do you have them come to your office or both?
Oh, I go to them.
Go to them? Get
Every
to
time.
touch field office or their manufacturing plant, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'm there to help them. They're not there to help me.
I like that. Very nice.
It's some people will ask to come to my office. I'm always open to that, and maybe that's what they've been conditioned for in the past. But I feel that it's my job to serve them. Ask to serve before asking to be served.
I like that. Do you take your laptop with you when you go?
Usually I will prepare stuff ahead of time and print off a summary of coverages that we can go over, a driver's list. I'm a little old school in that methodology only because I haven't found a better tool, but I'll print off a driver's list. I'll print off a vehicle list and I'll hand it to them and say, hey, is there any changes that need to be made here? Here's what we have. I like to go over the premise of the review. And I learned this from my first job. Here's the coverages you do have. Here's the coverages you don't have. And it's a little CYA for both of us, but it's also making sure that we're on the same page. It's a horrible feeling when a claim happens and somebody calls you and they say, well, I didn't know I could even buy coverage for that.
So backtrack. The reason I asked about the laptop is because I like to show them things in real time when they have questions about, well, what does that cost? What does that do? So that I like having my laptop to show them.
Yeah.
Because people like real-time feedback is the only reason I asked. On the flip side of that, just lost my train of thought. Where did you end?
Well, my job in those reviews isn't really to talk about price. It's more, we're talking more bigger picture here than just, is this going to save me $38 if I raise the deductible from $500 to $1,000? That's not the point of the review.
just going back to that advisory role, making sure they're aware of
100%.
what they have. Okay. I like that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not about, hey, how can I save, $72 on my insurance right now?
okay.
It's, I meant to talk about this earlier, and there's a chart that's out there, and I'm going to pull it up here on my computer just so I can reference it. But it's a concept that talks about risk retention versus risk transfer. Okay.
Okay.
And if you can imagine this chart, probability from low to high on the left side, and across the bottom, you have low to high, but severity or financial impact on a business.
Mm,
Okay. And so if you have something that's very highly probable to happen and very low severity,
mm-hmm,
okay, you're going to try to risk manage that the best you
mm-hmm.
can. Okay. If you have something that's very low probability and very low severity, you're going to self-insure that. Okay. Door dings in your car. I'm just going to self-insure that. I'm not going to turn in a claim for every door ding on my car. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other side of this is you have very high probability and very high severity. Well, that's something you need to probably try to figure out how you can avoid that risk altogether. Okay. That's not something, drinking and driving,
Right.
very high probability for an accident, very high severity if it happens. Okay.
Right.
You should just avoid that activity altogether. But then you get into the sweet spot, and this is kind of where we operate as insurance
Mm-hmm.
people, and that's risk transfer, where it's a very high severity, medium to low probability of happening. But man, if it did happen, it would ruin me.
Right.
And that's where our advisory role comes in, is in that bottom right quadrant there, talking about risk transfer and how they can transfer that risk to us. But as you talk about educating clients, you need to be having these conversations about, what are the chances of something happening? And if they do, what's the financial impact on your business? Does it make sense to risk manage that through risk reduction? Does that make sense to avoid it altogether? Do we self-insure that, or do you pay us to cover that for you? Right? And the higher the severity and the higher the probability, the higher the insurance premiums.
Yep.
Okay.
I love your terminology. So I usually position that as what do you want your insurance to do? How do you want it to work for you? Is how I do that. But I love that the different modes of like setting that up. Love that.
Yeah. And
Thank
so
you.
that kind of frames, that's what our reviews are about. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, your deductibles, and we're going to review your limits of insurance. Did you add on to the building? Did you guys take on a new operation that you weren't doing before? I know I have you rated as a carpenter where you're doing interior closet remodels, but did you start building rocket fuel plants and didn't tell me?
Right. Right.
Those kinds of things that we need to, those are the points of the review.
Right.
It's not, how can I say, the buck on
Premium
insurance.
focused.
Yeah.
I like that mind shift, because even though I focus on education and understanding it, it's hard to break that mold from what the clients want on my front as well.
Well,
So I like that.
that starts in how you frame your conversations from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're focused on price at your initial conversation, that's going to permeate your relationship as you move
Right.
forward. You can't change the rules of the game after you started playing the game.
Sure. I like that. I like it. You mentioned these are the endorsements you have versus you don't have, as like the CYA for you both. Do you have them sign off if they choose not to purchase anything, or do you have them
Yes.
sign any? Okay. So you have waivers on all of
Yeah,
them.
because I've gotten bitten a couple times.
Gotcha.
And you don't have to get bitten too many times to start. It's amazing. People have selective memory later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we try to make sure every phone call is recorded, every email's filed, just so we can go back, right? That's why I do quote videos for small commercial and personal lines. I can say, hey, right here in this video is where we talked about how I offered you an umbrella and you chose not to take it.
Okay. I have a producer question, not a sorry, clients, listeners. quote videos, you just do a recorded quote and send it to them to listen to whenever they want, or you like hop on a meeting like this and
Oh, no.
record it?
No, I record a video and send it to them.
Oh, just text, email?
We have a whole system. I think that's probably a whole hour-long podcast in and of itself.
Okay.
And maybe something we can get into offline. I can share that with you.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. I'm very interested in this because you also said recording phone calls, which I'm sure ties into that and everything.
Yeah,
So,
it protects the client too.
yeah. Yeah. All right. I
Now
like
we
that.
both have a recorded record of what took place.
I like that. Awesome. Okay. I think we kind of touched on this, but I'm just going to recap, make sure I'm not missing anything. Is there any other disconnects besides premium and how they are conditioned between the business and the insurance transaction that you would want to hit on?
A lot of people think that it's all the same, and I have a really funny meme that I've shared before, and it shows a woman sitting on a porch who's pregnant, and a man sitting next to her who has a huge beer belly. And it says, while they might look the same on the outside, it's on what's inside that's different.
Yes. Yes.
And I could not think of a more appropriate comparison to insurance. Everybody thinks it's all the same, and it's not. Everybody buys their insurance based on price, but then when they have a situation, they hope they have the best coverage. Well, it
Right.
doesn't work that way.
No,
Right?
I agree.
And it's, I can't tell you how many times people say, I did not understand insurance until I talked to you.
Yeah.
Because we talk to them in real world terms, not fancy legal jargon and not fancy insurance language.
Yep.
We use
Yep.
terms that they understand. For example, uninsured motorist coverage. This is where you and I, as responsible adults, get the joy and privilege of buying insurance for everybody else out on the road who didn't buy it or didn't buy enough of it.
Yep. Easy enough.
Right?
The person who's driving around without it.
Exactly. So that's what uninsured and underinsured motor. When you use fancy, terms that the insurance carriers use, people don't know that. They don't understand that. I could go on and on and on about that. But
yeah, my goal is not to impress clients with my lingo.
correct.
It's to help them understand. And we typically say, most insurance policies are at least 10 feet wide. They're not all 10 feet deep, is how I kind of like, you can only wade in some of them.
I
you
do
can go
like
swimming in the others. So
that's a very good analogy I've not heard before. So
yeah, I try to use that for home because everybody has A, B, C, and D on their home. Structure coverage, other structures, personal property. That's all there. But is that all you got?
Do we have replacement costs? Do we have guaranteed replacement costs? Do we have extended replacement costs?
Yeah. Yeah. Nope. I love it. Okay. Do you have any real life examples of how someone has came to you, you've showed them the value of protecting themselves, protecting their assets for, making sure their liability covers their assets, not just having that CSL $1 million coverage where you can say they listened and it protected them? Do you have any examples of that?
I've got a couple that I've come across where we prevented something bad from happening. One is years ago, I was working with a construction contractor who had 3 cranes that they rented out. So they would rent them out with operators. And so if you were setting roof trusses or setting an air conditioning unit up on the top of your building, you would call them. They would send their crane with an operator to put that up on the roof for you. Very highly skilled at what they did. And I'm reading their policy, and not just the deck pages.
Right.
You got to understand that. The deck pages are not the policy. I'm reading the policy, and I come across deep in the depths of the policy a manuscripted exclusion, which means the carrier went through great lengths to make sure this particular thing was excluded. And it excluded any liability for what was referred to as on the hook, meaning anything attached to the crane that they were lifting. So lifting an HVAC unit, cable snaps, the unit falls down and seriously injures somebody or something. It was scripted into the policy that it was excluded. And I don't just say, oh my God, your agent's an idiot. I can't believe they did this to you. I just said, hey, were you aware of this? Was this your intent?
They probably had no idea.
100% they had no idea. And another one, I haven't even told them about this yet. It's a fairly new contractor that just bought all new equipment, new Bobcat, new attachments, 2 new Bobcats actually. And I'm reading through their policy, and their equipment is insured at actual cash value and not replacement cost.
Mm.
So I don't know. I mean, if I'm a contractor, I just spent $70,000 on a piece of equipment and it gets stolen. I kind of want
Appreciation
my
is already
$70,000 piece of
yeah.
equipment back, right? I don't want a used piece of junk. I want mine back. And so, things like that you can point out, very simple things. And I try not to attack anybody. I try to just ask if that was the intent or were you aware,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not, oh my gosh, your agent's an idiot. Because, that means that you're implying that they're an idiot too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I really like that. We really try to review, but sometimes getting the policies from the other person is not easy. I mean, is that something that you like, look, I need this or else?
Yeah.
Or,
If you don't want to help me do the best job that I can do for you, then I'm sorry, I'm out. If you
okay.
blacked out the premiums and blacked out everything, I'm out. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? Why are we doing this? What is your intent? Well, I
Yeah.
just want to keep I want to keep you honest. Look, I'm going to give you the best price I can give you.
Mhm.
Okay. Because I know that's important. I'm not playing Mickey Mouse games. It's a waste of my time, usually.
Yes. Yeah. Nope. I agree. Um, couldn't agree with that more, actually. Um, I think we've already hit on this, but we'll just re-elaborate. What do you feel the importance of endorsements are? Cyber, professional liability,
Well,
EPLI.
I'm going to flip your lid. I don't consider them endorsements. If it's done correctly, they should be their own standalone policies. There
Oh, you
becomes a
don't
lot
like
of
adding
limit.
them on?
I do not, because there's
Okay.
better options out there for
Okay.
comparable cost. For example, cyber liability. Just because the one carrier that we have endorses the policy, and it's better than nothing,
Right.
right? Taking over-the-counter vitamins is better than nothing, but actually taking a higher quality vitamin is going to have a better impact on you, right?
I like that.
And so I prefer to get a standalone policy for those things because those carriers are really good at that one thing, right? They've written the policy, and if you understand them, you start to know where to look for the differences.
Oh, I
So
like that.
standalone cyber, professional liabilities, those types of things, when it makes sense and you're aware of the differences, then it makes sense to, again, it goes back to talking about what we offer. Now, there's certain things like employment practices liability, for example. My favorite thing to talk about with that, if you have employees, I don't ask them if they want this. I
hmm
simply say, you have employees, you have to have this. I don't go to my doctor, okay, and say, hey, doc, you need to provide me this, this, and this because my knee hurts.
hmm
No, the doctor says you need to go do this to make your knee better.
Yeah.
That's
You
a
listen to his
professional,
advice.
right?
Yeah.
That's a medical advisor.
hmm
And I don't say, no, I don't want that, right? I went to him to make me better. And that's kind of how I view what the role we play, right? Look, I know what happens to other businesses. It might not have happened to you yet, but there's a chance of it happening. And if I could predict the future, we would both be out of a job.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And if I could
We could
predict the future,
predict
I
the
wouldn't sell you
future.
this coverage.
Right. Right. It's all
That's
about risk mitigation.
There's a carrier out there that their main punchline on every ad, only buy insurance for what you need. Well, what the hell do we know what you need until it's happened?
Right.
Then you can't buy insurance.
Okay. There is such thing as being denied, and customers
You,
don't like to hear that when they're no longer uninsurable because they didn't know.
People come to me because they need an advisor. I tell them what they need from a coverage standpoint. Certain
Mhm.
things are non-negotiable,
I
right?
like it.
It's just, I'm going to present the program as I would insure my own business.
hmm
And that's what I feel that you need.
Yeah.
And again, if they say no, take that off. Okay, here, sign this.
Okay. Yep. Just sign that waiver. I like it. Conversation for not here. Love to have a conversation about your standalone options after the fact.
From
So how do you handle claims history for people who have a handful of claims histories and they're having trouble getting coverage, but they're willing to hear what you have to say as an advisor and they're willing to like regroup. What are you doing for them?
I'm really glad you asked that because I have like the example of all examples. I have it even starred here on my sheet. So there is a contractor that I've called on for years. And finally he said, yeah, I'll let you give me a quote, right? Because that's the terminology they're used to. I'll let you give me a bid. Okay. So I said, first thing I'm going to need is a copy of your claims history. So they send it to me. And this business has about 25 vehicles, about 30 employees. Mm-hmm. And in 5 years, they have rear-ended 14 people. Right? And so I don't move any further than that. I said, hey, I can't help you as far as the insurance goes, but you can't keep this trend. You've got to fix this because you're going to become uninsurable. If this trend continues, other carriers are going to say no. And you're going to end up paying 3 times as much for your insurance. He's like, well, what can we do? I said, well, you got to get buy-in from your employees. They can't just think that there's this magic pot of money that keeps covering up their mistakes. And so what we ended up coming up with is for the sake of time, I'm going to shorten this, but they put an employee safety dividend plan in place that if any employee had an at-fault accident, any employee, nobody got the bonus. Okay. And if they went a year without anybody having an incident, then everybody got the bonus.
Okay. So they held each other accountable too.
Exactly. So now it's not micromanagement. Second thing that we did was the employee is responsible for half the deductible in an at-fault accident. Okay. So if you're driving my truck and you wreck it, you're responsible for half the deductible. I'm not covering you for your mistakes. So year 2 comes around. We put these policies in place. And it was really funny. The owner got really, really mad when we had this conversation. And, he stormed out of our meeting. He's like, I don't know. Why isn't my current agent giving me this information? I said, I can't speak for him. I mean, I do know he gets paid a percentage of the premium. And if your premiums are higher, that means he got a raise.
Right.
And that's when he stormed out of the meeting. He was pretty upset about it, as you can imagine, right?
Yep.
Fast
People
forward,
get mad at the truth.
Fast forward, year 2 comes around. They'd had a great year, no auto claims that year. Okay. So I actually do the full submission. Underwriting says, hey, we need to see one more good year. Okay, cool. So we had the conversation. I said, keep it up, right? Keep it up. Just keep doing what you're doing. We're getting results. Now we just need those to be more consistent. Okay. Prove that it wasn't a fluke. So the next year comes around, renewal comes around, and I stay in touch with them, right? Throughout the year. Next year comes around. I get everything, I submit it. But see, now we've had a couple general liability claims that have popped up. One of them was they dug down and hit a power main, caused a big power outage. And another one was they drove a forklift into a piece of equipment. And I said, the conversation shifts to, it's not about the price. It's, hey, are you willing to put some skin in the game? This is not a pricing tool, by the way. This is an acceptability issue. I said, are you willing to put some skin in the game? He was like, well, what do you mean? Well, we've had 3 general liability claims, all resulting in property damage. I said, are you willing to take on the first $5,000 or $10,000 of a property damage claim and put your money where your mouth is to the carrier and say, hey, we're bought in on this. We're bought in on this risk management. We're willing to pay the first $10,000 for any property damage claims. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do 10 grand. I said, great. So now when I'm talking to underwriting, it's not, I got to be at this price to sell the account. It's like, hey, here's some things that have happened in the past. And this is where an advisor comes in. We're not policy peddlers. These are some things that happened in the past. Here's what we've done to correct them. Here's the results on the auto. And here's where the owner's going to put their money where their mouth is. So it wasn't about getting a cheaper price. It was about getting them placed with a premium preferred risk carrier that's going to provide them better coverages, better services, better claims, on and on and on and on. Had nothing to do with price.
Right.
So then it came down to proposal time, and I was equal money with another guy who didn't have the deductible, who brought in a different carrier, but he chose to go with me. Why? Because I advised him.
Over the course of a couple of years
Yeah,
without
it took me
being
3
hesitation.
years.
Yeah.
It took
Yeah.
me 3 years, but his account is now set up to have a better picture in the future. So if any business owners end up watching this podcast, if you're not asleep at this point, when an insurance advisor comes in to speak to you, I want you to picture that they have a painting easel and it's blank. Okay. And the colors that are on my palette are all the risk management things that you're doing to prevent a claim, because the insurance carrier is looking at what has happened in the past
Mm-hmm.
and what's the chance of something happening in the future. That's what they're looking at. We're
Yep.
professional gamblers is what we are.
Yep.
So I've got
What
my
is the
easel.
probability? Yep.
I've got my easel here with different paint colors on it, and I'm ready to paint, Mr. Business Owner, Mrs. Business Owner. And whatever you tell me you're doing to prevent something from happening is what I'm painting on this picture. And when we're done, I'm going to turn this picture around and show it to my underwriter. And they are going to say, yeah, I like that picture, or no, I don't like that picture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So give me some stuff that I can share with underwriting that is going to make the picture of your business look better. And that is how you end up getting preferred carriers, more rate stability, not the huge fluctuations, not getting canceled. At the end of the day, bad things are going to happen. That's why we exist.
Right.
But did we do everything we could to prevent that from happening? It was just a bad thing?
Yeah.
Or is this a trend? Right.
Right.
And so that's, when you talk about people that have bad claims, that's something that you can do to advise them,
Mm-hmm.
not just peddle policies.
Help them get through it the next couple years and let them see your quality, essentially, because you know the industry and how that works.
Well, it's not about me necessarily. It's not about me personally. It's just
Right.
about putting their business in the best position to succeed. Every business has a table of advisors. They have an accountant, they have an attorney,
Mhm.
right? They have a financial advisor, maybe they have a banker.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person that needs to be at that table is your insurance advisor, because while all of those other people are focused on building your net worth, I'm focused on protecting it.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So well put. Okay. Let's see. I think we already hit on the rest of these. We already hit on what the new process looks like when a business wants a quote unquote quote. I guess let's leave them with this. If you could relay one thing to a business owner, one thing, leave them with one little nugget, because these have all been great, phenomenal, not just for me, but I think it helps give other business owners perspective on what we're trying to do. One thing, what would it be?
Don't think you know everything when it comes to managing risk. Find an advisor who can fill in those gaps. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. Okay. And so find somebody who can see your blind spots. That's why people hire business coaches. That is why, you try to surround yourself with people that are better than you, because a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah.
So I'm going off on like a cliche run here, but they're all true.
Yeah.
And so, when you're hiring an attorney, for example, you don't have 3 different attorneys draft you up a contract and then tell you the price for that contract and you pick the cheapest one.
Right.
You find an attorney that you jive with, that you can connect with, that you feel is knowledgeable and has already showed you some level of expertise that can help you move your business forward, and you hire that attorney. Then you hire them to draft you a contract.
Yeah.
I would advise
Cheap is not always better.
I would advise you to hire your insurance professional the exact same way. Find somebody that you can jive with, trust them to do their job, and put the program in place that you need. That is, price is important. I'm not ignorant. Okay.
Right.
Price is important, but it is not the only factor, because here's the thing. I can always make it cheaper. That doesn't mean it's right, and it doesn't mean it's better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that, because I have clients who have came to me and we've doubled their premium because they knew what was important. But I also have clients that I feel like come to me every 6 months, every year for price. And it's navigating what that looks like.
I'm sure there's an agency down the street that would love to help them with that.
They're just, they may be a better fit for that person, because I truly want to, like, that's the conversation I keep having with them. Like, I don't want you come to me and say, oh, I need to file a claim or this happened. And I say, oops, sorry, that's not on your policy, because that does happen.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Well, JC, this has been absolutely phenomenal. I hope that people truly, like the amount of knowledge that you have that you put out there, the analogies, the examples, and that's what I try to give people, real world examples or comparisons to understand and educate. Because like I said, I don't care if they know the lingo. I'm not here to impress them with my vocabulary, for lack of a better word, but you've put all the examples, all the analogies, how they can understand what it means for an advisor. And I can't thank you enough. So
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Knowledge is not to be held solely. It's to share so that other people can also be knowledgeable.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all for listening today. We hope you found this episode helpful and informative as you navigate the world of insurance. As a reminder, this podcast is never for legal or professional advice, and you should always consult your local and licensed insurance professional. We wish you a week filled with love and blessings from the team at Odyssey Insurance and Investments.